We're now going to get a little bit deeper into the syntax. One thing that we want to talk about in JavaScript is a statement. And a statement is basically the code equivalent of a sentence. It's one line that basically gives a single command that you're supposed to do. And we've already seen statements. So for example, alert, hello world, is a statement. Statements in JavaScript end with semicolons. Sometimes they're a single line like this, but they also could be something like variable x equals 7. So there we've set something equal to another thing. We could do 8 times 4 as a statement. So a statement is basically one instruction. It ends with a semicolon. It's a single line. And we've seen some new things here. So this alert hello world, that we're comfortable with. But here I'm doing some math, and here I have this var thing. So let's talk a little bit more about that. Let me clean this up. Let's just start from scratch and look at this var x. So if you remember your elementary or maybe high school math, you had variables where you would say things like x equals 7. This is what we're doing here. We have variables. It's a name that we make up that's going to store a value for us. So we can say x equals 7, and then we could alert x. If we run that code, it's going to show us 7. If I change what x is, if I make it 17, I reload my page and it shows us 17. So x is basically a placeholder, so I can use the value anywhere that I want. When we're introducing x for the first time, we put this code var in front of it. That means it's a variable. When I use it after that, like I did here, we don't put the var. I could also do something like x plus 3, and I don't have to have the var. So that's just the first time you introduce it, you use that. I can set it equal to something else later on. So start with it equal to 17, then set it equal to 8, alert it, and if I reload my code, you see we get what it was set to for the last time. So the first time you introduce a variable, use var. After that, just use the variable name. We can have multiple variables, so we could have a variable y equals 23, and then we could alert y. And of course, this is going to work the same way. We see 23. We can also do things with those variables. We can do some math operators. So let's have a variable z, and that's going to be equal to x plus y. And we can alert z. So that should give us 40, and it does. There's a few different ways of doing math in JavaScript. It's all pretty much what you would expect. You can do addition with the plus, subtraction with the minus sign, multiplication uses the asterisk or star, division uses the forward slash, and we can just take a look at that one. So we get this big long number. That's great. But you can use these in other ways too. So we could have a variable with a more complicated name, like name, and I'll put my name in there. And let's have a variable job. And then I could say something like name plus is a plus job. All right, so a bunch of stuff going on here. First, we have variables that are not set equal to numbers. They're set equal to other stuff. These are called strings, the thing in quotes. That's basically a bunch of characters stuck together. We put those in double quotes or single quotes. And we've actually seen this so far in our code. We've had things in quotes. But the type of information here is called a string. You don't have to change anything about the variable. In some programming languages, you have types. So you have to say if this variable will store a string or a number with a decimal place. You don't have to do that in JavaScript. Variables are just variables, and they can store whatever. So x could start off storing 17, and then we could come along later and set it equal to a string, and that would be fine. But what's going on here? I've got this plus going on. I'm adding strings together. What does that mean? All right, so the plus sign is doing addition when you have numbers, but when you have strings, it does concatenation, which means it just smooshes them together. So this is going to take whatever we have in name, and then it's going to stick onto that the string is a, the quotes won't be included, but the spaces will be. And then it's going to stick onto the end of that, whatever's in job. So it should say, the name, Jen Golbeck, is a professor. And if we reload, it works fine. I could change this to be Bob Smith, and we could say is a mechanic, and that works fine. Okay, so that's pretty cool. And what we're going to eventually learn how to do is, instead of having these hard-coded in here, we'll pull them out of form fields and we can make things a little bit more interactive. But that's the basics of what we call operators, the plus, minus, times, and division. Also plus for concatenation. Variables that you start with var, but then can use later on without the var. And types, where you can have numbers, you could have numbers with decimal points, you can have strings. You don't have to change your variables at all based on that, but just know that there are those different kinds.